Hey Vishal, how you doing?
Good, Rajiv. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. It's been a while since we actually sat down and talked in some detail, so looking
Yeah,
forward to it. I think
absolutely.
GE is a very exciting conversation. So just to introduce you real quick, and I'll let you get into a more detailed introduction yourself. But you're the CIO for global delivery. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Right. Actually, the title has changed. I'm the VP of the digital enterprise right now for GE Gas Power. So I
Okay.
own soup to nuts, anything that is considered an enterprise system, which includes a lot of the ERPs, the bolt-ons, mobility, cloud innovation, enterprise cloud innovation, all of that within GE Gas Power. We're about $14 billion in revenue. We're part of the GE conglomerate. Our primary focus is enabling sustainable and zero carbon delivery of energy to the world. The company produces about 45% of the world's electricity today. Our equipment produce 45%
I
of
did
the
not know that.
world's. Scary start. With power comes responsibility, but we're proud to be where we are.
That's a great one. Yeah, with great power comes great responsibility.
Responsibility for wing-to-wing value stream realization, where enterprise systems play a very big role in this landscape. That's all. So,
Gotcha, gotcha.
cool.
So in terms of your mandate, you're seeing overall end-to-end delivery for, you said, mobility, cloud, and a whole bunch of other things, right?
Right,
And
exactly. When it's connected to enterprise platforms, so you do have disruptions that we are bringing into the marketplace, and there's a software engineering team that beats that puzzle
yeah,
along with. So software engineering is in different pockets. Cloud engineering is also in different pockets. But when it comes to enterprise systems, and you take the SAPs, the Oracles of the world, Salesforces of the world, and then you start innovating in the cloud or transformative applications, either in the cloud or within the ecosystem, you have a very different mindset because you are somewhat limited by the boundaries that these monoliths put on you in the traditional world. But the hyperscalers have allowed us to think beyond the monoliths. They allow us to think of the art of the possible, which says, don't go through this every 4-year upgrade transformation cycle, which is how a lot of these large companies have made their revenue. But to say, how do you take the true agile mindset to bring disruption and transformation at a much more rapid pace at real low cost? And it is the combination of the structured data and so systems of record and sources of record that the monoliths provide, and very rapid time to market for innovation that the hyperscalers provide. It's the beauty of both worlds. So you don't have to start from scratch, but you build on top of what you have. That is the intersection in which I sit.
gotcha, gotcha. That is definitely a very exciting intersection to sit at. Um, so I'm really excited because I first heard about, GE being one of those big enterprises that was really going through the whole, I'm a big lean startup devotee, and I've been following Eric Ries, and I have implemented a lot of his principles in the consulting work that we do. And one of the first lean startup conferences I went to was, I forget the name of the gentleman, but the CEO at the time of GE, I think this was like 7, 8 years ago, was being interviewed on their FastWorks program. So I definitely want to get that with you. Is first of all, I mean, is that still a thing at GE? Are you guys still doing that?
Yeah, we're doing that in different ways. So what we were trying to do at that point was to build a platform within GE, which mimics, what the hyperscalers are doing today, and a lot of the industry solutions within the hyperscalers are trying to do today. And we did that about 5 to 7 years ago. Two things didn't work for us. First, I'll be honest, we may not have had the muscle to do it. You're coming from imagining heavy engineering on one side, which has its own life cycle, and moving that to a software realm. And we call it people call it the digital twin, all of that today, where you say anything that is a physical asset, I'll create the digital model for that. Easier said than done.
Right.
And that's not very straightforward. If the number of moving pieces for all of these are so high, and there's so much stochastic forecasting behind each of those pieces, that it's not very easy to put a cojoint analysis of so many variables together. And then people come and tell me, oh, why don't you throw hypercomputing at it? No, throwing, that's like throwing bullets at a gun. It doesn't work that way. There has to be a much more streamlined approach. So we had to obviously curtail our ambitions, and we lost a lot of money in that space, but we learned a lot. We learned what we did wrong and not to go into those spaces, but to partner effectively. The second is we still have the platform and we still derive good amount of revenue from it. But we then moved it much closer to the businesses rather than have them stand alone as a unit. You move them closer to the businesses because the action is happening at the businesses. They're not happening individually.
To be clear, you're talking about providing the digital twinning
Correct.
services is moved closer to the businesses now.
Correct. It not run as a whole company. We used to run it as GE Digital at one point. Now we have digital engineering and GE Digital within each of the businesses. So gas power has its own, aviation has its own, healthcare has its own. Because by having one separate entity looking at all these diverse businesses and now trying to prioritize amongst each of them is not a fun exercise, never will be. But you get closer to the business, you now make decisions of whether do I build, do I partner, do I acquire, all the different permutation combinations start coming in.
Right, right.
And you're in sync with the cycle of the business. And so you're not defined by your own cycle, but you're defined by the cycle that the business adoption will take place. So that's the big change, basically.
Cool. So Vishal, you were just telling us about how the digital aspects of the business have moved closer to the business units. And
right.
That was one of the learnings that you first try to get a GE Digital, which was independent, which consulted with the independent business units. And your learning was, they need to move at the speed of the business unit, not at an independent speed, right? So
right, because the adoption, right, and the adoption in the businesses are vastly different. So what if they were, think of it, the entire energy industry is going through a complete transition right now.
Right.
Then you look at that, and then you look at, if you were GE Digital now, how do you get the pulse of the industry? The GE Digital people never sit in the industry conferences. They have no, they don't have insights into where they are and all that. So one thing is you have to be in the business. You can't separate it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a big change, right?
Right, absolutely. I mean, transformation and innovation is not, an add-on. It has to be, it happens at the intersection of business and technology. And
correct.
You cannot really just plug something in like a technology and expect transformation to occur. But,
right.
But there's a trade-off too, right? Because are you losing out on the center of excellence concept of, sharing best practices and things between units?
Yes and no in some ways, but today technology is very democratized. 5 years ago, that was the case. Nobody knew what Cloud Foundry was. Not too many people really knew what containerization was. Docker was really like, oh, really? What am I doing here? Okay.
Yeah.
But today, that's very democratized. Nobody even goes into containers. You're going into Lambda functions, you're running this play, that play, and all those kinds of things. So you're really not in that mode.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of high-level tools now which make it much easier to do that.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. Just about most of my developers are cloud certified in some way, shape, or form. And they understand what cloud is. But they did not come with a cloud background. But they got there. And so now for me to think of the art of the possible is very different.
Gotcha. You used that phrase before. I'm curious to understand what you mean by art of the possible. How do you look at this? And what in your role, like, what do you see as innovation? Like, what is possible for you?
Well, innovation. So that's a tricky one. Innovation would mean something better than what you were doing yesterday.
Right.
Doesn't have to be skyrocket. It doesn't have to be disruptive. It could be disruptive to my internal population to an extent, but it cannot be disruptive to a customer.
Right. Incremental.
To add value to incremental value to the customer.
Yeah.
And art of the possible is more of telling my internal stakeholders and my customers, have you even envisioned something like this? And I'll give you an example. In the middle of COVID crisis, we were given a problem. When people were going on site, they needed to wear requisite amount of PPE and safety equipment. And not all of them following it to the T. So today, what we have is, based on the country that you go to, we have an augmented reality app, which you just point either with an iPad or phone at the person, and that'll tell you whether he is fully protected for that particular site that he's visiting. There's no ambiguity in that.
Yeah.
Now, we were able to do that in 8 weeks now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And can we market this outside? Probably. But is that the true value for us? Or by saying my people are going to be safe when they go to the site, I'm adding tremendous value to the customer and reducing liability at the customer side. I have a choice. I have to make that decision. Because if I productionize it and put it as an industrial app that all my other competitors can also buy, is that the value I want to realize out of this? And then what is the differentiation that I bring? So do I stick to my core tenets and further the gas powered industry for power generation, or do I go somewhere else? So these, at every step, you start thinking about, which ones should go outside and which ones should stay inside. But what I mean by the art of the possible is, if you spoke to my service engineers, to my field services personnel, they would all, they wouldn't have thought of this. They would have said, okay, let's take a paper checklist and say whether this is right or wrong. But by doing something like this, it has taken away ambiguity from everything. But we had to show them that this is a possibility. Would you invest in this?
Right. So how did that come about? Can you give me a bit of background, or how did the idea even come about?
Yeah, people. So we, at the end of the day, we have 15,000 strong field engineering team that travels the world and goes to sites. If you look at a plane engine, the plane engine comes to you. Gas turbines are static; they're fixed on the ground. So you go to the gas turbine to service it. So we have experts who travel. We may have as much of an immigration team as any large corporation, any large consulting organization, because they are masters of moving people between countries. And so as people go from one place to the other, in COVID times, we realized not everyone was aware of what is needed for that particular country, because I could have a guy from France going to Israel, from Israel going to Turkey, and from Turkey going to Iraq, and from Iraq going to Germany, and Germany to France before he knows what's happening. It's regular for us. Now, each country, as it went through the COVID cycle, had constant changes in regulations, constant changes in safety measurement, and things of that sort. So you had to get it going in that particular cycle.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what drew some of those innovations for you then. And
Correct.
Did that come from was that like a problem statement that you received from the business units?
No, we realized this was a possibility. We set this challenge across, saying, what can we do in this particular space? And 3 people came out with this idea. And then we formed a team of about 7 or 8 people. We didn't have all the technologies inside. So we went around, looked for technologies that we could onboard very quickly. We found a great augmented reality vendor to come in and do that for us. We partnered with him, and he got us the glasses, the software. We put that on AWS, and within about 4 weeks or 6 weeks, we had a prototype running. And now it's productionized, and we're using that in most of Asia right now.
That's awesome. So was that so to tie this back to some of the lean startup and the FastWorks stuff we were talking about earlier? Is this part of your FastWorks program, or is that still a thing? And how are you?
No, we don't call anything FastWorks at this point in time. There's no separate line of thought called FastWorks.
Gotcha. So that's been, would you say that's become grafted into the DNA now?
Yeah, exactly. You start thinking that way. And by the way, every organization is thinking that way today. There's no need, and it was a flavor of the day 5, 7 years ago. But today, it's more of how do you take it to the next level? What is coming out of it? Just having a principle that you believe in doesn't work anymore.
Right. But there, do you have like an innovation challenge, or how you said you put this idea out and three people
Each
responded?
each team does it its own way.
Gotcha.
So different teams do it differently. So within my enterprise team, I had a hackathon a month and a half ago, and we got 9 awesome ideas. We decided to fund all 9 of them. And we are working prototypes from all 9 of them, which we are using to solve real business challenges as we speak. And all of them were addressed at business problems that we have.
That's fantastic.
And so, yeah, so that is one way of doing it. The other one was COVID came and people wanted to look at how to solve some problems, and they went about doing it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that really does sound like, there was some inertia maybe a decade ago, and, there was a push towards getting some of these new concepts and kind of democratizing it amongst everybody. And
Right.
FastWorks was the brand to basically enable that democratization. But now it certainly sounds like every department has some version of their approach to innovation.
Right. They do.
That's great. That's great.
Yep.
So I guess then the next problem for you guys must be saying no a lot, right? Because you have so many ideas. What do you do with it?
Right. And we would have had many more ideas, but the good thing is we never say no to ideas. Ideas keep coming in. It is how do you navigate existential challenges? Like my Swiss team is affected with COVID, my India team is affected with COVID. So every time you think you're at a point where you can get more ideas, you run into natural challenges at this juncture. But we have a constant funnel of things that we want to do. My list with my hyperscaler partners is so long that even they are having trouble trying to truly fund it across the board.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah. So do you have a matrix? I know there's tools out there like the portfolio map and things like that.
Yeah, Catalant is one thing that comes to mind. We're trying to figure out which way to go. There's EPM tools there. There are the agile tools, Jira and Rally provide both of those. So we have we use Jira in a huge way, Confluence, Jira, the whole set of Atlassian tools. There are teams that use Rally in some way, shape, or form. Now we are in the process of standardizing and combining all of that, and then putting an EPM on top of it. And all these guys are also navigating towards EPM. So if you have a great discipline in agile execution, you have a great backlog management process, prioritization process, all in one tool, I would urge people not to bring in another vendor and add another tool on top of it. You're better off using Jira or something like that and continuing the journey in that fashion. People don't realize when you have a team of, total team of 600, 700 people worldwide in the organization, that's Gaspar, IT is about 800 people. And all of them are very fluent and are disciplined in running projects through Jira or one of these. Now, don't put another tool on top of it and rip this out.
Right.
That is a transformation exercise by itself.
Right.
And then you lose a lot of momentum and things of that nature. That seems to be the flavor of the day. I get calls every day from, I don't know how many startups, I'm very sure you do, saying, let's solve one sliver of a problem. And I'm the best at it. And my thing is, what do I do about the problem to the left and right? They're like, no, we'll give you microservices to integrate. I'm like, okay, then what is my time to transform? That I'm not concerned is their answer.
Right.
We will help you bring that tool in. We will help you put it together. But then transformation is your headache, not mine.
Right. But how many man months are going to be lost in integrating it and transforming it and then actually finding out whether you got an ROI on it or not?
Right. And then who's going to pay for that loss in productivity during that time frame?
Exactly.
Nobody talks about that. So every startup today, be it AI, ML startups or portfolio management or agile management startups, everyone wants to do this. Well, Snowflake wants to do it. Everyone wants to do it. But I'm like, okay, you can do this. What is my project timeline? What is my ROI and what is my payback? There is no answer.
Right.
Which is why I'm happy that the cloud guys democratize this, but I'm not sure how this is going to end. That's all.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the tools that you do like? Like you mentioned Confluence, Rally, others. Do you have
Those are information repositories of sort.
Right.
Okay. I like Catalan a lot. And then what are the others? Tools for what again? I need to be particular.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of cataloging your backlog of innovation
Yeah,
projects.
so we use Jira extensively. Atlassian has a great portfolio of tools. Personally, we chose it because it was there.
Mhm.
And then they worked with us and we built a lot more on top of it and we managed the whole thing on that. And it's, at the end of the day, it's a repository. If you're smart enough, you can use Smartsheet.
Yeah.
For crying out loud. It's about how you want to manage the data and what more value will it bring to you. A lot of people have realized that there's literally no differentiation between a Jira, Rally, and others if you get down 2 levels below.
Okay.
So now companies are saying, oh, what, based on the skills that you need, what if I find you resources? So they're trying to go tangentially to show value. My thing is, I have contracted rates with my vendor partners, things like that. They have visibility to it and they're managing it for me this way. And they're like, no, why if you need somebody in Seattle and you have a great guy in Iowa, what do we do? I said, time out. I don't think of it that way. I think of, I have somebody in Uruguay and I need to balance that with somebody in Serbia or balance that with somebody in Dubai. How will your tool work? And they're like, no, we haven't thought of it that way. So sorry, for me, that's the level of risk management. My risk management is not just uniformly stateside. My risk management is global. And I have a very global team and I balance the globe. I don't balance a country or a skill. So that's how I think about it. And that's I think different between the traditional software vendor shops and how the enterprise journey is going to take place.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And this is great because, a lot of times our clients that are talking about digital transformation in the mid-sized space, right? First of all, they don't know where to start. And then when they do start, they don't see immediate results. It's like working out. You go to the gym 1 or 2 days, you're not going to see. So it's a long-term journey. And this story of FastWorks and where you are from where you started and the lots of issues that you had to go through in the last decade and the stock price crashed and all of that, and to where you're picking up to where you are now, that's a great journey of transformation. But on top of that, you're also doing these things at a level of scale where innovation is, the bigger the scale is, sometimes the harder it can get. If you don't have that innovation culture, you're just going to ossify. So tell me a little bit about, how do you you mentioned that you have now innovation is in the DNA and there's individual units are doing their own innovation thing. But then how do you make sure that the innovation that's coming out of these different business units is actually moving the needle at the enterprise level, at the top level?
So I'm not going to say I'm looking at everything that aviation is doing. I can look at things that are truly packaged and commoditized, like CI/CD pipelines, testing, test automation, things of that sort. I will take help across the board. When it comes to enterprise journeys, it's very tough to say I'm going to replicate what aviation is doing because aviation is in a different business cycle than I am. They're in a falling cycle. I'm in a growth cycle. And how I invest and where I put my money in a growth cycle is vastly different. And that is also different based on what geography and what my customers are asking for. We have very different customer profiles. So while I can take certain building blocks, certain things you can share, but it's like sharing empathy. Okay, you can share empathy, but you will not feel it till you're closer to the customer.
Gotcha.
And everyone needs to come out and say, I will learn, but I'll have to apply to my own problem.
Right.
It's like going to AA. Not everyone's journey through AA is the same. And it's akin to that. So we both will attend, AWS reInvent. What I take out of it is vastly different from what my colleague in aviation will take out of it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah, before we move on to the future, I wanted to just put a, kind of underline what your biggest learnings were. So you mentioned the kind of innovation journey, the business unit proximity. Are there any others that you would point to as kind of being the biggest journeys in the innovation landscape for you?
Biggest journey has been how not to do a few things. Everyone is trying to do a lot. And the key to victory in the next 2 years, 3 years is going to be to not do several things. And that is the toughest call a CIO can make today. That is what he needs to make.
Could you expand on that?
Sure. There are 10 shiny objects that will be thrown at you at all times by everyone, industry forums, customers, your internal teams, your technology debt challenges, all of these, they come in all flavors. A CIO needs to step back and think of, what is it that I'm not going to do? You can easily say, I want to do everything.
Right.
That has been the biggest learning. Which ones do you drop?
And of course, you're going to fall back to your business units, right? So that
Right. You're falling down to your business and you have to make several decisions. Some of these are business decisions. Some of these are, I don't think you should do this now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no value in you doing this now. You want to spend 150K on this, but don't. You could use this 150K to do 5 other things. How do you tell that story is the biggest challenge a CIO has.
Gotcha. And so when it comes to new technologies, obviously there's lots of stuff out there, AI, whatever, AR, VR, you mentioned an example there.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff there. But part of it is someone, I'm guessing in your organization, has to go get some experience with some of this stuff in order to come back and say, hey, here's a dozen
Right.
cases that could apply to, right? And or are you pulling that in through vendors? Like, how do you internalize some of this stuff and make a decision on this? Like,
So we have different teams that do that in different ways. So when it comes to monoliths, hyperscaler innovation, things like that, we have dedicated teams that actually go out and do it.
Right.
So I have a cloud innovation UX team underneath me that focuses a lot on what native services are these hyperscalers providing. How is experience, not just user experience, how is experience changing the way we adopt, productionize, and regain or retain value with our investments? There's a whole team that looks at that. UX, it was called the UX team prior to it. Now it is a future of work team, all of that. They combine RPA, true mobility, all of those kinds of things. And mobility comes in different ways.
Yeah.
So that team is like my reconnaissance team of 9 people who are like facing forward. But what we realized was when they would talk, the others would be like, either they would gloss over or it would go above their heads.
Gotcha.
So we realized that we had to get a lot of people at least to a level where they can appreciate what these teams are talking about.
Yeah.
Last year was spent in getting most of my team at least the basic cloud certification. So they understood when these guys spoke that there is the possible here.
Right.
It's no longer the art of the possible. There is the possible.
Yeah.
And that excites team internally.
Got it. So the Recon team is basically your, advanced force, basically. They're going out.
It is. But then Recon is not one dimension. So if I tell people that only that team is going to think of innovation and you guys are all going to be dumb jocks, it doesn't work.
Right.
So you have to tell each of these people, and there are lots of people, right? So I have a whole release team that thinks about how to release products into the marketplace. How do you do that? So they include CI/CD, testing as a service, all of those kinds of things. Not only testing, security as a service, a lot of those things that happen. How do you get those people to also start thinking differently? And how does the reconnaissance team also take inputs of these people?
Right.
Because they're seeing the shiny object. They're seeing, oh, AWS did partnered with so-and-so company, or Azure partnered with so-and-so company, and lo and behold, everything happened. So I'm like, that's like a Hollywood movie. The hero came, hero fought, hero won. You don't know the journey through that. You only know the stages. You don't know the journey that happened. How many people died? How many people are sad?
Yeah.
The hero suffering from PTSD. Is the hero going to survive? You have no idea. You only know the milestones.
Yeah.
And let's face it, people only love good stories.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great example, and I can totally understand what you mean by that. So that's actually a good question, because you have, like you said, you don't want to create animosity between the teams by saying that, hey, don't worry about it, you're dumb, and these guys, the smart guys, are going to take over it. So how do you have those conversations? Because these are, people, everybody has the biggest problem that I've seen for enterprises, I mean, or mid-sized companies even, is that everybody thinks they have a day job, right? My day job is to do X, and then the rest of the stuff that I'm doing is extra, right? I get bonus points for doing innovation or whatever, right? So nobody sees that as their job title, but they all want to be a part of it, right? So how do you align these people to have those conversations? Or do you have like a cadence to this, or do you have
Yeah, we do. We have cadences. So we meet with the team every quarter, individually, everyone.
Yeah.
And we go through the priorities, performance, and goals. We call it the PPG process.
Right.
And one thing I tell them is, if you want to do what you're doing day to day and nothing changes, you may be okay. Then don't expect the 125% bonuses. If you just do what you're doing and don't want to try that extra, you get 85% bonus. If anyone just checks the boxes, comes in morning, goes on,
right,
you'll make your money, you'll make your salary, you'll make your EOP, you'll make 85% bonus whenever the bonuses are announced. But what is going to differentiate you from someone else? And that is the metric that we use as a driver for people to effect change. But we also realize not everyone wants it. There are people who are incapable of it, people who are happy just doing the same thing. So I'm not going to waste time on that. There's 10%, 15% in my organization that really wants to differentiate. And I'm going to do that.
Gotcha. So how do those conversations end up manifesting? Do you find that
Yeah.
your smart people from the business units, for example, want to move to the Recon team, or do you feel like you want to keep them there, right? From a business point of view, you want smart people distributed. You don't want all of the
Right. No, we don't move. So some of them may not even have the skills to go into the Recon team. It's okay. But they innovate on their own. So I have team members who are exceptionally knowledgeable in the SAP world, for example. So we decided, okay, they're so ingrained and they understand this so well. There's no point in taking them and putting them in, containerization, Kubernetes, service mesh on Kubernetes. There's no point in putting them there. They'll be unhappy. And it's like asking a fish to climb a tree and then calling him stupid because the fish couldn't climb the tree, basically.
Right.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to do this. So we set up a course for innovation, or whatever we call it, on how they could differentiate themselves within their sphere of influence. So there's a lot of personalized work that's happening for these top performers in my team, which says, you can do these, you can do these, you can do these. Sometimes I throw a challenge at my team saying, how are you going to differentiate yourself? That works.
That is really exciting. Are you partnering with HR on this, or how does that kind of happen?
My HR is very commoditized. The problem with HR is my HR can't keep up pace with this. And they don't understand what I'm trying to tell them. If anything in this, I would like a stronger HR, not the current HR that I have. My current HR is more worried about base cost, metrics, people distribution, span of control. But we feel those are traditional HR metrics which were valid about 10, 15 years ago.
Right. So this is really about culture building, right? Not only building, but also maintaining and accelerating.
Correct.
And ongoing growth. So in terms of that, so you are, I guess, what is the leadership team that kind of is taking responsibility for different aspects to build that culture across multiple teams.
Right. And so each leader now has in their position the ability to show what they want to make this organization to be.
Gotcha.
And that's the big difference that we're looking at right now. And I just, in my organization now, I have 4 big leaders. And I'm in the process of recruiting a 5th one. And their role is going to now change the way we do things, basically. Okay.
Gotcha. And you've been with GE for how long now?
15 years.
15 years. So you must have seen a lot of change in that period, right?
A gazillion changes, yes.
Give me if you don't mind, a quick kind of summary of kind of the phases, if you will, of what some of the changes that you saw. Like, was there a certain impetus and certain initiatives that worked and didn't work?
Several things, right? The whole GE digital debacle of us getting into that didn't work. We brought that. So what is amazing is we've come full cycle. We were a very operational driven company.
Yeah.
I joined, which is why I loved it. And we've gone through the whole cycle. We literally imploded, self-explored, and now we're back to being a very strong operational company. In the next 2 years, we'll be an exceptionally strong operational company. But it required leadership changes as well. Jack Wells, then Immelt, and within Immelt, you have multiple changes. And now you're going into Larry Culp. So you've literally come 360 degrees in my journey. But along the way, we've picked up great pieces of assets that we think need to be part of our DNA, and we continue to evolve and innovate in that particular space.
Cool. So yeah, I know we're getting towards the end of our time. We have a few more questions. Can you point to some of the resources, like books, content, areas that you look to, like podcasts, maybe things that you look at to keep yourself updated?
So I used to listen to a lot of podcasts before COVID. After COVID, my podcast has just come down.
Really? It's been the other way for me.
Oh, okay. Probably it's because I spend more time with kids right now, things of that sort. My driving has literally stopped.
Oh, that's.
And I would listen to most podcasts.
I see that.
I read a lot more than podcasts at this point. And I'm part of tons of CIO groups and industry forums, and I speak at multiple events. So I keep myself abreast with all those things. Reading is all across the place. Business Intersection, anyway, the Fortunes, the Forbes, and all of them. I have subscription through TechCrunch and a lot of, I partner with a couple of VCs, sit on advisory boards of Landmark Ventures and things like that. So there's continuous newsletters and updates coming from them, McKinsey and others. So that's one way, but a lot of it is actually networking within the industry.
Gotcha.
That's where I get most of my information. Books, these days, by the time it's written, it may be out of fashion. I'm okay with books. Okay, some of them are seminal works and they can be applied over the years. That's fine. That I'm okay with. You look at Peter Drucker and any of those, they still are valuable today. There's nothing that's taking that away from you. But how do you apply that is a whole different concept. And a lot of it is experiential learning. I'm working with Emory University to design their masters in data analytics for execs. That is amazing. You're sitting with industry people. What are you feeling? There are a lot of people who specialize in Python coding and SageMaker, SageMaker Pro, TensorFlow, all these libraries that have come out. But the moment you ask them, this is the business problem I'm trying to solve, they have no answer. They're like, no, I can code this. No, I don't want anyone to code. Will my customer buy this? Oh, that is not my problem. My problem is I can code a probability for you. I'm like, no, that's not working. So they have a master's in data sciences, but they have no one to interpret what these guys are going to do and decide whether this is going to work for them or not. Right? That's the next frontier. So those things excite me more than just, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to Mike Tyson's podcast.
Oh, yeah?
It's pretty fun. But that should take my mind away from what is happening today more than anything else. And it's important that, we cultivate the right side of the brain. And I just don't want to be tech-dominated, left-brained individual. So that's a story.
No, absolutely. I love everything you just said, because that is one of the biggest problems, right? If you know what you're looking for, then that's half the battle, right? If you have a skill but you don't know what problem you're solving, then that's a much more of an uphill climb. And that's basically always been the challenge with tech, right? There's always been like the tech guys speak their tech language and the business guys speak their business language, and it just never, tech was never taken seriously in large enterprise because of that. They were always kind of set aside and like, we business guys know what we're doing, we'll call you
Right.
kind of thing. But if you really have to integrate yourself, you have to think like what you're saying just now, which is you got to speak the business language as good as the business people, and
Right.
be able to offer them solutions that they're excited about, and not just push things on them that you thought was cool.
Right. Yeah. Or partner with your customers directly. So I've been in situations where CIOs of our customers have come to me and said, "Can you consult for us?" So suddenly I've spent time in Qatar consulting for one of our customers. I spent 2.5 weeks there a few years ago, about 6 years ago. And because they were like, "We love what you've done. Can you come down here and show us what we can do with our program?" So it became, a good revenue stream for 2 weeks, where we didn't even expect. The sales guy was like, "Really? Can we do that? Can you do that for all my customers?" I'm like, "No, I don't have the scale. I don't run a consulting outfit here. I'll do that one to win a massive deal for you. But I'm not going to do it because, every customer has, tomorrow somebody's going to give me a laptop and say, solve this problem for me. It's not going to work for me." So,
Right.
cool.
Well, yeah, that's good to know. I love your attitude, by the way. That's exactly how I look at it. You gotta meet the customer where they are.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Well, this was great talking to you, Vishal. This is great stuff. I really appreciate you taking some time. All the best with everything you're doing. And do you have any asks for my audience? So I guess primarily here in Central Florida.
No, if there was a way for me to interact with them and really hear from them, am I on track? Am I thinking the right way? What should I change? I appreciate any feedback, because feedback is invaluable. That's one thing that, when somebody gives you feedback, then I think of it as, gift that somebody's giving me. So if there is a way for me to close this loop with your audience in some way, shape, or form, I would greatly appreciate it.
All right, wonderful. Well, I'll take your social media handles if you're on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'll make sure to publish that and keep that as an open question for my audience to reply to you.
Absolutely. Cool. Thanks, man. Later.
Thanks, have a great one. Take care.
Bye.